I'm a communist, and whenever I want to talk to somebody about current affairs, the three questions they tend to ask me the most are the following. What's up with North Korea? What's going on with China and Taiwan? And what are my thoughts about Ukraine? Now, the interesting thing about these questions is that each of them pretty much has the same answer. But to understand that answer, you have to have a strong foundational understanding of how the world works. Whether you want to admit it or not, the world is actually divided up into camps. Sometimes they call us communist campists for acknowledging this, but it is true, even if you wish it weren't. On one side, you have what we call the evil empire, the G7 nations. The countries who, especially after World War II, emerged as economic and military powerhouses dominating the world. This is the United States, of course, but it's also many of our larger European ally countries. These countries have a number of proxy states that are essentially used as military outposts for our every need. This includes places like Israel. Some of you think Israel controls the United States. No, it is actually the other way around. And if you want to learn more about that, I have a massive podcast episode about the United States and Israel's special relationship that you can check out on my podcast, Pick Me Up, I'm Scared. But also places like South Korea, Taiwan, and Ukraine. And it's not just those places. It's other places too, like Rwanda. Increasingly more, Argentina. From there are a number of nations in the periphery who basically don't have the military or economic strength to oppose the evil empire, as we call it, and are kind of forced to go along with whatever they want or risk getting completely destroyed. Now, on the flip side, there are the global powers who are strong enough and brave enough to stand up to the evil empire. Spoiler alert, they're all of the countries you have been taught to hate if you have access to Western media. Iran, North Korea, Cuba, China, Russia. Now, I know the tide has turned a little bit on current public opinion of China, but it's only because a streamer went there and literally showed you guys everything you thought you knew about China was wrong and a little bit kooky. But trust me, even just 5 years ago, I heard you guys saying the same things about China when I got on this app that you say about places like North Korea today. These places have been excessively demonized by the West precisely because they have the audacity to stand up to the West and what the West wants. Now, it's worth noting, all of these countries that oppose the West are not necessarily communist or Marxist-Leninist like I am. Russia, for example, the second largest political party there is Marxist-Leninist, my political ideology, but it's not the overarching doctrine of how the country works. Iran, similarly, is not an expressed Marxist-Leninist country. But that doesn't stop them from standing up and fighting against what the evil empire and our proxy states are doing around the world. Iran famously fighting back against Israel, and Russia famously fighting back against the United States' cruel blockade against the Cuban people, as well as our previous attempts to overthrow the Venezuelan government during Donald Trump's first term in 2019. Then, of course, there are a number of countries around the world who don't necessarily have the economic or military strength to stand up to the empire on their own, but are increasingly doing more of their trade and switching their alliances to the resistance. Once you understand that this is how the world is divided, geopolitics will start to make a lot more sense to you as well. If you have access to Western media, you are hearing constant negative propaganda about our political enemies all day long, every day. And not just a little bit. We are talking massive, billions with a B, dollar propaganda campaigns designed to discredit these people. Everybody knows that capitalism in the United States and Israel are bad. Since we can't switch the narrative on that, we figure, why not make them think that our political enemies are actually somehow worse, though? And this is why the Western world has come together to try to discredit Russia, Iran, North Korea, Cuba, China. You get the picture. And to learn the truth about geopolitical situations that involve these countries, you often have to pursue a counter-hegemonic narrative. You have to look for news that is not being propped out by the evil empire, because clearly them reporting on their foreign enemies is a massive conflict of interest. Just like you wouldn't trust Israel to tell you what's happening in Palestine, you can't trust the United States to tell you what's happening in Cuba, China, Russia, Iran, and North Korea. If you did trust the United States on these issues, you would just hear that all of those places were bad and evil, and you should hate them. Maybe even more than you hate the United States. The goal being to convince you that there are bigger issues for us to deal with than American capitalism and imperialism. They might even tell you that if you think about it, these countries are doing imperialism of their own, when in fact, they are not. So what's going on with Ukraine and Russia, with North Korea and South Korea, with Taiwan and China? Is really the same issue, a battle between the evil empire and the resistance. But wait a minute, you might think. Aren't Taiwan and South Korea and Ukraine the good guys, innocent people who were unfairly maligned by opposing forces of evil? Not if you look at any information or history outside of a Western evil empire bias. Ukraine experienced a proto-fascist right-wing coup in 2013 and 2014, backed by the US government, that set to work allowing and facilitating ethnic cleansing to occur in its borders. Their current conflict with Russia actually started because a region of Ukraine that was getting ethnically cleansed by literal neo-Nazis within its borders attempted to secede from Ukraine and start its own country for safety. Russia agreed to back them in their independence and cessation movement, of which over 90% of people in the region voted to go along with. Ukraine refused to let them secede, and the fighting started. North Korea and South Korea were artificially partitioned by the United States right after the end of World War II. South Korea became a neo-colony under American-backed dictatorial control. The Korean War started when North Korea attempted to liberate all of the Korean peninsula from the United States occupying armies. The Korean War never ended. The United States is still at war with them today. The entire South Korean military is still under United States military command. And we subjected them to the largest total blockade on the planet. And told everybody that they're not allowed to travel anywhere because their government doesn't let them. It's because our governments won't let them come here. China, for example, enjoys 200,000 North Korean visitors every single year alone on average. When they suffered massive natural disasters in the 90s that wiped out their farmland, we wouldn't even lift our embargoes against them to allow them to do trade, to bring in food. And when hundreds of thousands of people there starved to death as a result of this, we had the audacity to blame their government for it. Taiwan, similarly, is a cudgel in our attempt to weaken the power and strength of China. Taiwan has been a part of China since the 1600s, with an exception for the era of time where it was colonized by Japan. The only reason why they have their own governance at all is because a group of extreme right-wing MAGA types lost a civil war there years ago and refused to accept defeat, went to Taiwan, and claimed that they were actually in charge of the entire country of China and had just moved to the capital. Today, only 4% of Taiwan immediately wants to pursue independence from China. The majority of people are fine with things how they are, with Taiwan still being a part of China. Most Westerners don't even know Taiwan actually is not its own country. It is a part of China. These issues are all the same issue. The Western powers attempting to control and dominate the rest of the world, and demonizing anybody who dares to say no. The Donbas region deserves to be free and independent, like 99% of the people there want. Taiwan deserves to maintain its current status quo, being a part of China, like almost everybody there wants. North Korea deserves to be liberated from the American-backed brutal war that continues to rage against them, and these sanctions and embargoes that come along with it, for them just having the audacity to try to defend themselves. Americans, even liberal and progressive ones, end up supporting the right-wing MAGA movements in other countries simply because they fail to understand the real division of power geopolitically.